Hi, this is the video for Monday, October 12th in 11th grade English. I am going to start on this slide because it's important for everybody to know. I'm calling this a catch-up week or a redemption week where, and I never use exclamation points, so you know this is a big deal. Every stem you write this week for middle passage can replace a missing or a not so great stem from your past. If you're caught up, then every stem you do this week will be bonus. It'll be a bonus point for you. Redemption week, use it. It means you don't need to go back into the past and dwell on things we read weeks ago and wonder what on earth you could say about them and looking at what upon I will redeem, even though that was the last unit. Instead, stay with us. Stay focused on middle passage. Dive into it. Do well with this poem. And every stem you use this week will replace missing assignments from the past. So that's the first big thing I want to make sure everyone understands. It's a good week to be paying attention in class and doing your work right at the end of our sync time at 3:45. Or if you're watching this asynchronously whenever it works for you, but to stay focused daily. Otherwise, here's our agenda for today. We focused on section 2 of middle passage, which I'll call the Bella J section because it's about one of the ships is called the Bella J. Looked at a brief poem, and then today we really talked about physical space on the ship, the difficulty of enduring this kind of voyage because of the conditions of the ship. And that ties both our slides together with the reading itself with this article. The stem is a little new. You take a look at it with me. Last week we did before, after, if statements. Today we're doing when, even though, while statements. The construction's the exact same. It's just that the word is different. So look at that. Notice where the comma will appear. It's going to go right where the before, after, if clauses would end, but you're switching out the meaning a little bit. So we'll do that stem all week. So, middle passage. Make sure that text is open. Pause this video if you need to get it ready. I'm going to go to our understands for a moment to complicate them. So our first two understands in this unit with the Puritans and the Pilgrims were that America is this place where you have the freedom to believe or to be freed from belief, that religious freedom will characterize our nation, and that this story is an Exodus story where people were leaving old worlds of slavery into these new free worlds. Except the promise of liberty is filled with violent contradictions, including the willful enslavement of Africans. And that's our three understands for the unit. So that third concept directly contradicts the first two, and that contradiction of liberty is going to be built into this second week. All right, so open your assignments first. You're going to need it. The new middle passage poem, text itself on Schoology, is what you'll be using. And go directly to the part in the first section where it says the line, which one of us killed an albatross? We're going to have a little reprise. This is all about, today, physical space, except I want to go back for a moment to that religious sentiment and prayer. This line, which one of us has killed an albatross, it makes no sense if you don't know what the religious and cultural allusion is to. And it's from this poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Here it is, the epic ballad with a plot really similar to the plot of Pirates of the Caribbean, where this ghost ship comes through the waters and they have extraordinarily bad luck and end up becoming the undead. So they're on a ship and they can't die, but they're not fully alive, which is, again, the Pirates of the Caribbean. This is a really old poem written by Samuel Coleridge. This is what I want us to see. So the ice is everywhere in the poem. At length did cross an albatross. Through the fog it came, as if it had been a Christian soul. We hailed it in God's name. So this bird comes, and with it, it brings this wonderful weather, balmy seas, the ice melts. Everyone is so pleased that this albatross, which seems to them Christians, you have this religious imagery coming through, has spirited them away in this really good tide. Goes on, goes on, goes on, and then the mariner, who narrates the poem, says, God save thee, ancient mariner, from the fiends that plague thee thus. Why look'st thou so? Because with my crossbow I shot the albatross. Why? Just felt like it. It was for fun. And what happens? This is when they become the ghost ship. So nothing moves in the sea. He has done a hellish thing. The breeze stops blowing. The ship is stuck. Down dropped the breeze, the silence of the sea, the painted ship on a painted ocean. Oh Christ, that ever should this be, slimy things to crawl with legs upon this sea. And why? We go down. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young. Instead of the cross, the albatross around my neck was hung. So, who among us killed an albatross? Hayden is going to this poem, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and he's trying to help the reader know that the diarist, the person writing that part of the poem, was referencing this. If you kill an albatross, it's very bad luck for you and the ship. And so, this person writing is so unaware of why there would be such bad luck that he wonders, which one of us killed an albatross? Never mind that perhaps they all killed an albatross by bringing 500 and odd slaves onto their ship. So there's a lot of irony baked into that first part. That is your poem for this morning, or this afternoon. So back to this second part of the poem, the Bellege, and the promise of liberty filled with these violent contradictions. The ships were places of disease, suffocation, death. Today we're going to consider those conditions a little bit more. And we're going to do this by looking at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which, if you're so lucky, maybe you've been. It's so popular that it was difficult to get tickets until recently, and of course recently we've been in a pandemic, so even harder to get tickets. It's an extraordinary design. If you look at the art of it, the making of this was so careful in its attention to detail and architecture, and the interior is very much also careful in its design. So here's the top floor. The enveloping lattice, this part over here, can be modulated according to the season, if it's summer or winter. The openness to light is symbolic for a museum that stimulates this dialogue about race and healing. And from the topmost corona meaning just the top floor, that crown, the view reaches ever upward, reminding visitors that museum is an inspiration open to all as a place of meaning, memory, reflection, laughter, hope. So there's this really open design. And as you move through history in this museum, it gets more and more and more open. It's beautiful. But as I said, as you move through history, it gets more and more open. It suggests that the National Museum of African American History and Culture starts with the Middle Passage. And so it starts in this really dark, dark place. When you visit the museum, you start in the basement. And there, the bottom floor is the opposite. Visitors have to walk through a series of narrow channels to move into these very low-ceilinged rooms with intentionally dimmed lights. And that is to represent the Middle Passage. When you're a visitor there, obviously it's nothing like a mimetic experience of being on a slave ship. But they're trying to at least inspire that feeling of claustrophobia, of suffocation, as you're down here looking at the iron ballasts that are pictured here and imagining what maybe, as you read the primary sources, it might have been like to be a slave in these conditions. So that inspires this part of the poem. We're going to read it once for meaning, and then we'll go back and look at that physical space and the way that things are objectified. So here is section 2, Bellege. And the annotation space here, I would like you to annotate with the strategy of summarize, which just means write in this white space what happens in this part. In a poem, you sometimes just have to figure out, what is he saying? I'll read it aloud for us. Deponeth further saith the Bellege, left the Guinea coast with cargo of 500 blacks and odd for the barracoons of Florida. That there was hardly room 'tween decks for half the sweltering cattle stowed spoon fashion there, that some went mad of thirst and tore their flesh and sucked the blood. That crew and captain lusted with the comeliest of the savage girls kept naked in the cabins. That there was one they called the Guinea Rose, and they cast lots and fought to lie with her. that when the bosun piped, "All hands," the flames spreading from starboard already were beyond control, the negroes howling in their chains entangled with flames. That the burning blacks could not be reached, that the crew abandoned ship, leaving their shrieking negresses behind, that the captain perished drunken with the wenches. Further deponeth saith not, "Pilot, O pilot me." At the end there, that little piece of the song from Friday. So what actually happened in this poem just now? Well, the Bella J, that ship, left Guinea in Western Africa with about 500 blacks for Florida. But there was hardly enough room for them down there in the bottom of the ship, stowed like spoons, right up against each other, and some went mad of thirst and tore their flesh so they could drink the blood. The crew and captain, lusted with, brought up the most attractive of these savage girls, of these African girls, naked in the cabins. So they were sexually exploiting these girls. And there was one they called the Guinea Rose, and they cast lots and fought to lie with her, means have sex with her. But when the boss man said, "All hands," which is just short for all hands on deck, the flames, so there's fire, spreading from the starboard, a part of the ship, were out of control. The negroes howling in their chains entangled with the flames. And so all of those black Africans in the bottom of the ship were caught in their chains, burning alive. And those blacks could not be reached. The crew abandoned the ship, leaving their shrieking the women behind that they were just exploiting. And the captain, he perished drunken. He died drunk with the wenches in the room with the girls. Further deponeth saith not, which just means we have nothing more to say. Wow. So what happened? The physical space of this means that when it caught fire, the 500 blacks that were stowed below, as they put it, couldn't get out and had to burn alive. And that image, that intense visual of physical suffocation due to flames, it's done so carefully here because the emotion is not in the language. The diarist is just telling us what happened. And that's the slave trader just trying to capture the narrative. So in the white space, you're just telling us what happened. But in your stems today, you're trying to capture the more emotional space of, as I put it here, the African captives were stowed like cargo onto these ships. They're human beings that burn alive, but they're treated like goods that have been burned and lost, maybe for their profit, and there might be a touch of regret in the tone. But overall, this just seems like it was par for the course, the way that it must be if you were going to transport human beings like they were cargo across the sea. So you're capturing that in the white space here, and then your stem is about the cargo. So I'll go back there for a second. The way that they treated the slaves that they captured like cargo. This is an extension. It's not required. You don't have to necessarily do anything with this article, but if you're really interested in this, I've linked an article that it's from the Washington Post about 4 years ago. It's all about how they recovered this slave ship off the coast of Mozambique in 2016. And you can see, just like the poem that we read, left with a cargo of 500 captains, this captives, this real slave ship. The slaves in this case drowned, suffocation by water and not fire. It's good to stop and think about the ways that these human beings lost their lives and really had no place where they could have escaped, and to just pause with that. The relics of this ship are being sent, or were sent by now, to the DC Museum, so you can see it there, and I encourage you to think about visiting someday. For now, though, your stems. Thank you.